Hi, it's Micky Dolenz here. You're listening to Inspirado Projecto.
Wowzers. What you're about to hear here is an interview with Bernstein from the documentary When We Went Mad. And it's an upcoming documentary. He raised the money on Kickstarter to put together the story of Mad Magazine. He was able to get a hold of these writers and artists before they passed on and to be able to hear their story of working for Mad Magazine. So he's now getting trying to get some, you'll hear about it in the interview. I'm so excited about this because on April 9th, this is so sad, Mort Drucker, one of my favorite artists, caricaturists from Mad Magazine, he passed on. And that night, I decided to do my first live stream on Instagram. My first Instagram live stream. So it was in tribute to Mort Drucker, Mad Magazine, and I just drew and I took suggestions from the audience, from the viewers, and I just improvised, the classic ensemble spirit of yes and. I just kept adding whatever they asked me to. A lot of things on there I'd never drawn before, but I gotta tell you, it's kicked me into shape. In a drawing again, and as a result of that, I went down this rabbit hole of looking for different interviews with Mad Magazine artists and writers, and through that, I ended up coming across an interview with Alan about his movie, which then led me to the Kickstarter page, which then led me to the website, which then led me to the Facebook page, and he agreed to do this interview with me. So, without further ado, and without further ado, a word from our sponsors, and then, of course, we will get on to the interview with Bernstein. Gosh, I'm so excited. Cannot wait to share this with you guys.
Here's your fun fact. David Lynch was offered the chance to direct Fast Times at Ridgemont High in 1982, but he turned it down, saying that the script was funny, but it just wasn't his thing. Stay tuned to Inspirado Projecto for more fun facts.
All right. Is this Bernstein?
It is indeed. Hello.
Very cool. Dude, this is Kurt from Inspirado Projecto. Thank you so much for taking the time to be able to talk today, man. I'm so excited that I happen to come across any information concerning your documentary, because I think I had sent you a message saying that for the longest time I've been sitting there thinking, man, that'd be so great if someone made a mad documentary, and I saw an interview with you where you basically said the same thing, and you just decided to take it upon yourself to be the guy.
That's exactly how it went down. I just kept pretty much waiting for other people to put that documentary together, and it just came to the point where we were starting to lose some of the writers and artists, and I thought, well, the time is now. So I just kind of cobbled together some equipment and did my first interview with Al Feldstein.
Wow. Now, were you able to catch Jack Davis before he died, or was that one of the
Well, I wasn't able to catch him after he died. No, yes, I was. I was able to catch him before he died, yeah.
Oh, you did? Oh, that's
I did.
Good. That's good. Who were some of the writers or artists that passed on before you were like, oh gosh, okay, you know what, we've got to hurry up and document this before the rest of these guys,
Well, before I started, the two big ones were Dave Berg and Don Martin, and Harvey Kurtzman, obviously, but it was pretty much Don Martin and Dave Berg that kind of convinced me, like, we got to someone has to get started on this,
dude.
And
yeah, I mean, these guys are like they're living history books. These are guys who you'd have to hear it straight from them, all the kinds of crazy hijinks, that went on. Who was the very first person that you interviewed, and how the heck did you even get a hold of him?
Well, Al Feldstein was the first, and actually he was coming into town in the Detroit area, which is where I live. A friend of mine who is also a Mad fan was actually putting on an exhibit at Eastern Michigan University showcasing basically the origins of Alfred E. Neuman. There's a lot of history behind that image, and my friend John was putting together this exhibit, and he brought Al Feldstein in to talk about it. And as a side bonus, I was able to sit down with Al and interview him for what I had hoped and would hope to become the documentary. So it was very bare bones. It was, I just need to sit down, I need to get these questions in, and we'll go from there.
That's exciting because, once you get the first person, and especially if they got a good rapport with you, they had a good time telling their story, there's a very good chance that they end up telling one of the other people that then, it's kind of like a word of mouth type of thing. Did you notice that it was kind of like that for you?
It happened on occasion, yes, definitely. Truthfully, for the most part, the people who I approached were very accommodating and genuinely, at least they appeared to be genuinely interested in sitting down with me. They wanted to tell their story, and I wanted to hear it. And the couple here and there who might have had some red flags were assured down the line from previous interviews that no, this guy's legitimate, and he just wants to get the straight story from you. So overall, I really didn't, as far as the actual Mad contributors, artists, writers, staff, I didn't have any issues at all in sitting down with them.
Oh my God.
And that was terrific. It was great.
That is so cool. Now, did you go out to before they closed up the office in New York, did you go out there and interview any of them at the headquarters itself, or?
We did, let me think here. We did 1, 2, 3, I believe I did 4 interviews in New York. The first series of interviews in New York were at the Society of Illustrators, which were terrific in letting us set up, and we brought in about 5 or 6 guys, usual gang of idiots, and interviewed them. And then, and that was the last series of interviews we did out of pocket. And then we were able to do this Kickstarter that allowed us to continue. And through that, we were able to do another few trips to New York. We actually did the other 3 interviews in the Mad offices. They set us up.
Oh man!
And I flew in as many and traveled in as many artists and writers as I could to come together to the Mad offices, and which was cool unto itself.
Dude, I bet, man, that must have been
became
crazy.
Like a reunion. Oh yeah, it became like a reunion for them. So I think they really enjoyed that. And then I actually the last interview I did was with about 3 or 4 days before their final day in New York. So I went in one more time to get kind of a parting words from some of the guys.
Oh man, what made them decide to close shop out there in New York and move it out here to California?
It was strictly a DC Comics decision. DC apparently had moved all of their other publication from New York to Los Angeles about 3 years prior, and they allowed Mad to stay in New York, and eventually they just reached the decision that they want to bring everyone into the fold, and so the decision was made to bring Mad to Los Angeles.
Gosh, man, it's crazy because I've been going down a rabbit hole of just seeing any sort of interviews that I can find with any of the writers or artists, or just anything, just to get some sort of idea as to if the brains behind the operation were just as zany as you read in the magazine. And sure enough, these guys, you could tell that they're like Monty Python. It seems like they're just like really riffing off each other, and they really appreciate each other's company. Did you feel that kind of vibe when these guys were talking about each other, and when you just saw them, you know, all congregated together there, for instance, at the office?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, these folks are some of the best humorist writers and artists of not only their time, but of all time, as far as I'm concerned. And you get them in a room, you get them comfortable, and you let them tell their stories, and you can't help but at times just sit back and go, yep, this is why Mad is what it is.
Oh my gosh. You know, it's so crazy, because when I see the video footage of William Gaines and just how jolly of a sort of a Santa Claus of the Mad Magazine office he was, he just seemed like such a funny little, like, giggly kid in a man's body. And like, when you got someone at the top like that, a leader who is that joyful and open to humor like that, you just know that everyone else who's working there is going to have an even greater time.
Well, certainly, and not to correct you, but to add to the element of Bill Gaines, as I learned, I had the pleasure of meeting him once, but it was as a fan, and it was a quick pop into the office and say hello, and he was very accommodating, and you know, he was sharing some time with a Mad fan, and so that was my experience. But as far as the Bill Gaines icon, he, for as jolly and as vivacious and love of humor as he was, as I have come to learn, he could also be a big grouch.
Oh,
as Sergio Aragonés described him as a grouchy Santa Claus.
That's a great way of putting it.
So, you know, the stories that they would tell, you know, one minute he would be storming through the offices with an invoice for 32 cents for a phone call, long distance phone call, trying to track down who made the call, and then later on that afternoon he'd take everyone out to lunch and drop, you know, hundreds of dollars on just this most decadent meal. So I think he loved the image that he portrayed, and a good deal of it wasn't portrayal. It was who he was.
Mm-hmm. There was, to circle back to something you said before about the origins of Alfred E. Neuman, Bill Gaines was talking about in an interview where that image, and, you know, correct me if or please add on to it, whatever the heck else you know about this, but he was saying that it came from a dentist ad, and I found it, because I had to rewind him, you know, in this interview to find out what exactly he said. Some kind of he said the name of the company, so I looked it up, and sure enough, there it was. There was the, you know, I saw the inspiration behind it on some dentist for some dentist ad. What else do you know concerning that story?
Well, I find his story. I find the Alfred E. Neuman story fascinating because it isn't definitive. There are different theories. The theory that my friend John came up with, and it takes a very scholarly turn, which is something that you don't necessarily want to apply to Mad, but when it comes to Alfred, he did some serious research, and his take on it, and I tend to subscribe fully to it, is that the image morphed over time. It originated as an Irish kind of image, and over time that image morphed into an anti-Irish immigrant type satire, type cartoon, caricature. There are images out there in the 1860s, 1870s where Irish immigrants are pouring into America, and the satirical articles or cartoons of that time kind of portrayed them in very very unflattering images, and within them you can see traces of the Alfred E. Neuman face. And over time, as this theory goes, the image kind of morphed, where it became more about portraying the Irish as kind of lazy drunks, and the image went from this kind of ape-like face to more of a jolly, more of just of a happy-go-lucky drunk. And then somewhere along the line, it was picked up in advertising, and the dentist, the painless dentistry one you saw, was one of them. There's an image which, as far as I'm concerned, it's a spot on Alfred, and it's promoting basically a cocaine-based medicine. This image was adopted for like stage plays. It kind of shed the worthless drunk image and kind of adopted a more youthful, playful image. He lost the front tooth, and he became younger and more playful, and that sort of morphed into a couple different iterations. It was actually the image just prior to it being applied to Mad was seen in anti-FDR propaganda, and then eventually Harvey Kurtzman caught an image of this Alfred image on a postcard hanging in a publisher's on his billboard, or I guess by his desk, and he thought, that's kind of a funny face. I'll just start throwing it in the issue. I don't know that if he had any plans for it or not, but he just thought it was a funny face. And between him and then when Al Feldstein finally took over Mad, he kind of returned to it, thinking that Playboy has their logo with the bunny, RCA Victor has the dog. He thought Mad needed a logo as well, and they kind of basically stuck with that Alfred image, and the rest, as they say, is history.
That's incredible, man.
Yeah,
it's so funny
I think it's a fascinating story on so many levels. Especially on, you have it on a Mad Magazine level, a fan level, but I also am fascinated with it as an American story of transformation, of kind of talking about the birth of this where this country was at a few decades prior to the turn of the century, and how things changed, how things adapted, how things became more commercial. That's exactly what this Alfred image became. What was once very derogatory turned into a commercial selling point, and I find that fascinating unto itself.
It's interesting, like the very symbol for Mad. Like here is this whole story where his image has morphed throughout the years, throughout the who knows how long, like you're saying, turn of the century, and then Mad itself has been known for morphing along with what's going on with the culture right now, always just with their finger on the pulse of pointing out what's happening in society, and really it kind of reminds me of like my sister and I were just watching the movie They Live. She saw it for the first time, as far as I know. Okay. And there's that part where they put on the sunglasses and it says obey, consume, have babies, and then he takes off the sunglasses and it's just a regular poster, billboard. Sure. And that's what it feels like with reading Mad. It feels like it's one of those things where they're actually showing you, they're pulling back behind the curtain and going, look, this is what's really going on with celebrities. This is what's really going on with the politics. This is what's really going on with, with the movies, and kind of, helping you kind of dissolve that pretense.
And that's really, that is the history of satire in a nutshell. The concept of satire has been around for ages, for as long as there have been soapboxes for kings and despots to stand on. There's been someone out there willing to try to expose them for who they are. And Mad, in its iteration of satire, it it came around at the right time, at the right moment, and it just so happened to have the very best people to do it. And that's a heck of a way to have things fall in place for you.
Mm-hmm. I saw in your interview that you still have the original Mad magazine the very first one that you ever got.
Yes, I do. Yeah. One of the side stories of this whole thing is that I am a fan and I am a collector, and when it comes to Mad things, items, garbage, if you will, I'm a hoarder in that department. So yeah, I've got the first issue that I purchased when I was 6. And
wow.
I had no, well, it was my mom purchased it for me. We were in California visiting relatives, and we popped into a drugstore just to get a couple things. And, I was, hey, can I get a coloring book, something to, pass the time? And I saw Mad on the stand. I had no idea what it was. And I'm like,
wow, man.
This doesn't look like a coloring book, but it looks fun. Wow. It's got cartoons in it. Let's give it a shot.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. You were 6 years old reading Mad magazine. Like what a crazy education in the world for such a young fella. Like you probably got more education in that one magazine than you did through most of the schooling you were receiving at that point.
I would, tongue in cheek, yes, I wouldn't go that far, truthfully, but there's absolutely no denying that being a Mad reader exposes you to far more things happening in the world than you would if you were not a Mad reader, and I consider that to be an incredible bonus.
Oh man!
On top of just the humor factor, and especially when you're 6 years old and reading something like that, and it not only shapes your sense of humor,
yeah,
it teaches you lets you learn about what you think is funny, but to have such exposure of what's going on in the world, and what I found, and I'm one of many people who would say this, is that reading Mad forces you, if you're young enough, it forces you to ask the questions. Who are these people that are being poked fun at? What does all this mean? And if you're curious enough and you ask the right people, your parents, whomever, who are these people, you've got an inside track to what's happening, and you can't replace that. You can't replace that.
It's so funny because so many times they're making fun of themselves as, the usual gang of idiots. Oh, this is, you could use this magazine for fish wrap. They're always kind of like jokingly kind of tearing themselves down. But what's so interesting is it's such a high level of humor. It is such a, they got wordplay in there. There's puns. It teaches you about finding Easter eggs with Sergio Aragone's little tiny dudes in the margins. Mm-hmm. If it wasn't for that stuff, gosh, I gotta say, it inspired me to want to draw more. My friends and I would bring our Mad magazines to school, and we'd crack up over, what we were reading about, and it felt like sort of like this inside world that not many other kids our age were even aware of at that point. It seemed like they were just not aware of it. Like, do you feel as you were reading it that you were kind of on an inside club of sorts?
Yes, absolutely. And it depends on what the club is. And to kind of go back to what you were saying in describing Mad, Mad was many things, and I think that's truly one of the genius things about Mad is that it wasn't just a political satire. It wasn't just the insanity of a Don Martin joke. It wasn't the silliness of a Mad movie satire. It was all of those things. Every single issue had all of that going on in 48 pages. And if you had any sense of humor whatsoever, you would find something in it that grabbed you. The fold-in, the genius of the fold-in.
Yes.
To play around with that and and realize, oh wait, the next issue is going to have this as well. Spy versus spy. Me as a 6-year-old, I'm just looking at it as two people or whatever they were in endless battle against each other. But what you don't realize is that you're getting a taste of the Cold War.
Right.
And I mean, that was the genius of Mad, is that it was all things to all humor. And I mean, that's so great about it. That's what's so great about it.
Absolutely. Now, so how many, okay, because I'm just thinking you probably captured so many, like hundreds of hours of interviews with these guys, that it could very well turn into a series, whether it's a Netflix series or some kind of, Hulu or something like that. I mean, would you say that you got, enough to make a series?
From a Mad Dyed in the Wool fan, I could listen to these guys talk all day long.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that the majority of the Netflix viewership out there needs a 6-part series on Mad Magazine. They've got plenty of Tiger King to satisfy them for that. But there's definitely an hour and a half film, or an hour and a half feature that is what we're doing, that tries to tell the Mad story from the people who created it, but also to celebrate it and how it influenced so many. So that's what we're doing. But we do have a heck of a lot of footage with the guys.
How did you figure out? I mean, how did you even figure out where to even start with the direction in whittling it down to, a certain pathway or a certain story? How'd you even do that?
Well, from my perspective, one of the things I really wanted to do with the documentary was there have been plenty of news segments on the history of Mad, or a moment of time with Mad. 60 Minutes interviewed
Right.
them in 1987. They've had countless moments of that ilk, where they would get 5-10 minutes to talk about Mad and what it was and what it is. And I never found that satisfying. I wanted to hear the whole story. And as much as I love hearing from the staff tell their story, I wanted to hear from the other artists and writers whose names I've known since I was 6 years old and reading the pages. I wanted to hear them talk about their time at Mad, and that was so. First of all, I wanted to tell the Mad story, and I wanted to take my time doing it. The story is a lot more than just these artists and writers and a crazy publisher who likes to poke fun at authority. There's a bigger story than that, and that was the first and foremost thing I wanted to do, was tell the story in a broad sense. The second thing, to kind of go back, is I wanted it to be told by the people involved, and like I said, from the people who I haven't heard from before. And that's why we have far more interviews than I think an average documentary would probably want to get. But it was just imperative that I get to hear from as many of these people as I could, because they all have their own story. And I think that every one of their stories is important. So I don't know if that kind of answers your question on that. But first and foremost, I wanted to tell the history of Mad.
Mm-hmm.
Within that, I want to explore its influence. And through that, we're interviewing celebrities. We're interviewing people who grew up reading Mad and can attest to its importance in their formative years, and perhaps even their current lives. And there's no better way to get the story from the man on the street, if you will, than to get people in the spotlight, celebrities who can tell their story about Mad. And so that's what we're working on right now, is landing some more celebrity interviews.
Oh, that's great. I had the pleasure of meeting Sergio at one of the, I think it was a Chicago Comic-Con. It was just really cool to just, because he was just such, any of those guys with Mad Magazine, just such huge celebrities in my eyes. And just the influence that they've had on my mind. It was just so great to see him in person. And
yeah. And they are so approachable. They are so friendly. They truly appreciate you know that they've had an endless stream of people coming up to them saying, "You changed my life. You taught me how to laugh. You gave me a reason to draw." You know they've heard those stories countless times, and yet when you meet them, they love to hear you tell that story. They like to show off what they can do, and it's great. It's great when you get a chance to meet them.
I just remember when Gru the Wanderer came out, and just how cool that was, just to wrap my brain around that idea that here was this artist from Mad Magazine who actually had his own comic. And I just had to keep pinching myself going, wow, this guy actually has his own comic. And it was just as funny, as any of the stuff that would be in Mad Magazine. And I'd always get a kick out of that when I'd see, for instance, a Mort Drucker caricature of, maybe he did like a record album or something, and you definitely see his distinctive style out there in the world, and you go, oh my God, Mort Drucker, they know who he is, because like I said, it felt like Mad was such a club to me. It didn't seem like too many other people out there in the world really knew about it. And so when I would see that other people would, sort of embrace those guys, it was just so exciting. It was like seeing one of your friends do really well, hit a home run out in the field or something.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason with that is in many other publishing forms, comic books especially, you get a lot of artists and writers who don't do one project. I'm not a big comic book reader. I was strictly Mad growing up, but it wasn't uncommon for comic book artists to work on more than one project at a time, I imagine, or to cross over. With Mad during its heyday, Al Feldstein liked to keep a tight ship as far as his stable of artists and writers, and Bill Gaines did especially as well. And that meant that Bill, I think more so, did not appreciate his artists and writers really venturing out. I think the writers he was actually okay with, because a lot of them went on to bigger things than Mad, but a lot of the artists back in the day, he really wanted to keep them close to the vest and strictly working for Mad. And therefore, when you did see, if you weren't a Mad reader, you wouldn't be exposed to those people as much. But on those occasions when Jack Davis would do a movie poster, or Mort Drucker would do an album cover, and or Sergio would do Gru, suddenly you've got this outlet where non-Mad readers can discover them and go, oh, these guys are really good, and I've been missing out on this. Yeah, so I see what you're saying.
Oh man, there was I think it was about a decade ago. I went to the first time to New York with my buddy, and on my list, of course, was to visit the Mad Magazine office. And I just thought it was so cool that you could see the reflection of the Late Night with David Letterman in the reflection of the building. And it's like, oh, dude, it's right across the street. And so
exactly,
it was just the coolest. And so they let me upstairs and into the offices, and they showed me that memorabilia cabinet and the big golden Alfred E. Neuman statue, and they showed me around the offices, and I was so, and there was just one room that just had a whole bunch of just Mad magazines just in it. It was just boxes and boxes, and so they gave me a tour of this place, and they're like, yeah, it's not very exciting in here. And I go, so, because I'm trying to picture in my brain, like I'm thinking, it's going to be like a madhouse in there. You know, all these artists are going to be in there. There are going to be people running through the hallways. There's going to be, you know, people shouting out ideas to the other guy, and he's drawing it. And which I'm sure it was back in the olden days. But when I went in there, they were just like, oh yeah, the artists, you know, they send us their stuff, and then we kind of put things together in our, you know, I don't know, whatever programs they used to put together the magazine. But it was cool because they ended up giving me some Christmas ornaments from their Mad Magazine holiday party. So that was really cool.
That's
like,
awesome.
Go home with
that's
these.
Amazing. That's terrific. And that's the cool thing is I mean, the Mad offices are a working office. Their job is to put out a magazine, you know, be it 8 times a year, 12 times a year, whatever it was at the time. But you know, you got to believe that the Time magazine offices weren't set up for the Time magazine fan to come in and can I get a tour of this place? And
right,
you know, Mad, for being a relatively small operation in terms of size of staff, and like I said, they were a working office. They had a job to do, and yet it became a trip to Mecca for some of the fans, me included, to pop in, and they knew it, and they welcomed it, and their prior offices to the office that you visited was much more compact, and it was not in any way designed to be an office where people come in and get tours. That didn't stop them. Were always welcome to giving people a show of the place. But when DC moved them to Broadway, where you went, you can tell that they wanted to spiffy it up and open it up more and make it more visually enticing to not only the staff working there. I'm sure they enjoyed the view, but it became a little more, you know, fun for the fan to come over and get the tour.
So when you visited the office, did you visited? I wasn't even aware that they moved to. Were they on Madison Avenue? Was that their original?
They've had a handful of locations.
Oh.
They originally started on Lafayette, south of Times Square, lower Manhattan, if you will. That's where they started. That's where Bill started with the EC Comics. And over a couple moves, they eventually ended up at 485 Madison. And
is that the one where you visited? Is that where you met Bill Gaines?
That's where I met Bill Gaines.
Oh,
yes.
That is cool.
And the rumor, and it's probably true, that one of the reasons that Bill chose that office to move to is because it's one of the few offices, the few buildings that actually has a 13th floor. I guess
I love it.
Yeah, it's a common practice for buildings at the time to skip the number 13 and go from 12 to 14 out of that, you know, I guess that bad luck factor.
Oh,
but
right.
485 Madison had a 13th floor, and Bill loved it, and that's where the offices were, on the 13th floor, if I remember correctly.
So when you went in there and you popped in there and you said hi to them, what kind of vibe did you get when you're in that office with those guys? I mean, were they because in my brain I'm picturing that, you know, the writers and the artists are like in the same room together, and they're brainstorming on ideas, and artists are drawing, you know, almost as soon as the guys are brainstorming the ideas. And I mean, how close to that vision was that, like, that you noticed?
So the majority is, as I gather, the majority of the time at whatever office Mad was at, artists would work at home, and they would come in and drop off their work and go over it with whoever, be it Harvey or Al Feldstein, or Nick Meglin, and then, you know, they could stick around, make corrections, they could hang out and spitball new ideas, they could pitch ideas, the writers would come in and pitch, but for the most part, I think as far as artists go, they would work at home.
Okay.
Yeah, there are times where they would come in and use the space to work on things, but I don't think it was ever to do a complete story or anything like that. So when I visited the offices, and it was a couple times, none of the artists were there. There were a couple writers and the staff, and as cool as it would have been to bump into Al Jaffe, just kind of doing his thing, I was too busy kind of riding the high of just being in the office itself. And chatting with Bill Gaines and Dick DiBartolo and getting cussed out by Nick Meglin and ignored by Lenny Brunner. So yeah, it was great.
So what did the artists hang out? Like, did they all happen to know each other? I know, sometimes people all work at the same job, but they don't really have a rapport with each other or get a chance to really hang out.
Well, Bill Gaines made it a policy, and I don't know if it's common among other things. I'm sure, it's kind of like other offices where he would hold parties. He would have Christmas parties, he would have dinner parties, and invite the artists and their spouse over. But the famous thing that Gaines was noted for was each year he would take the staff and the freelance staff on these extravagant vacations as a thank you, as a means to bring the people together, to get a chance to know each other. And he would fly them to all these exotic locations throughout the world, 10-day excursions, sometimes longer excursions, and it was just an insane way of showing appreciation for the work that they did. Yeah,
this is so cool. There's so many stories in there.
The mad story is I know I'm jaded because I am obsessed with the magazine and the story itself, but I find the story behind the scenes to be so fascinating, to be so interesting, to have this publisher who did what he wanted and wasn't ever really challenged over it. He had to fight for his vision on occasion here or there, some rather big fights, but overall he ran the company the way he wanted to, and one of the ways he wanted to run it was to take these people on these trips, and basically it was a great way for him to write it all off as a business expense so he can eat in the great restaurants of the world. So what better way than to take all of his employees and freelance staff with them along.
It's so interesting. I do remember seeing the story in one of them where they had one subscriber out in like Zimbabwe or something, and they all decided to go out there to beg him. He stopped being a subscriber. I guess he ended his subscription. They all decided to go out there and to beg him to resubscribe to the magazine. And then I guess one of his friends ended up subscribing. So they're like, oh, now we got 2 subscribers out in Zimbabwe. What is that like? I don't even know if it was Zimbabwe or not, but it sounded like one of those faraway places.
It was Haiti, and if I remember, it was the very first trip that Bill took the crew on.
Incredible.
And I'm sure at some point the story becomes more legend than fact, but I don't know the fact of it, so I'm going with the legend. And the legend has it that when they got to Haiti, he Bill announced to the guys, hey, by the way, we have 1 subscriber in Haiti, and the subscription ran out, and he hasn't renewed yet. So let's go to the house and knock on the door.
God. See, that in itself would just be such a great to hear that from all the perspectives of the people who were there. I swear, man, this really actually would work great as a series, and I think that people would lean in and want to hear these crazy stories. Just imagine how many Mad Magazine fans are out there that we just don't even know about, that would just love to have something like this, or like a 3-part movie, or there are so many stories within each story. Just even each excursion could be its own crazy box that you unpack. Okay, let's hear about this story now.
I don't disagree with you at all. I do not disagree with you one bit. I would love to see that.
Oh my God, you've got so much great information, so many hours that you've recorded of these guys. I mean, it's such a crazy thing, because like, it must be a crazy careful blend of, well, first of all, throwing the bits of the history of Alfred E. Neuman in there, the way in which Mad Magazine was formed because of the comics code, and so they're like, well, the way we get around that is make it a magazine so that we don't have to abide by the comics code. And then you got the whole idea of them going on these excursions, and then you got just the crazy behind the scenes, of them going to movie theaters and laughing their ass off and going, oh, I know how we're going to parody that. And like, geez, I got to hand it to be able to go through so many of those guys that you interviewed and to be that diligent and in finding a way to whittle it down to find those stories, because you've got so much information to go through.
Yeah, you're right. And one of my biggest challenges, and I think for the most part I did a really pretty good job of keeping myself aware of it, was not to try not to get stuck in the weeds too much. Because I am the fan that I am, I find the stories that other people probably do not care the least about, I find them to be fascinating, and I had to do my best to avoid the Chris Farley. You remember that time? When you did that was cool. No, yeah. I had to do my best to tell the broad story and get enough of the minutia in without getting lost in the minutia, if you will. So,
well, I've been thinking,
I think for the most part, it succeeded. So,
oh, dude, yeah, and it's so interesting. There's a really good there's a documentary all about National Lampoon, and if you haven't seen it, it's so beautiful, and just that kind of reminds me of like what you're doing here with Mad Magazine, where it's showing all the behind the, all that stuff, all the behind the scenes, and the evolution of that, and how National Lampoon started as in the Harvard Lampoon, then they made it a magazine, and then of course they got into the National Lampoon Radio Hour, and they just kept expanding it, getting into movies. Why do you suppose that Mad? Well, now first I'll ask the question, then I realize the blanks I need to fill in here. Why do you suppose Mad didn't dive more into making more Mad movies? Now I know there's a Mad movie, well, sort of a Mad movie called Up the Academy, or I don't know, something like that. And then
it's called Up the Academy, yeah.
And then they did Monster Party, which was like a stop motion thing. They based on.
No, that is not. I hate to correct you on that, but that is not related to Mad. There are people who worked for Mad that were involved in the project.
Gotcha.
That is not an official Mad production.
So did you ask them any of those, or did they let you say why they didn't want to get into? I mean, heck, they had plenty of talent. Why they didn't want to get into producing movies or anything like that?
I did, and the general answer that I came away with, it kind of a buzzkill, kind of a letdown, is essentially that Bill Gaines, for as much as he loved Mad, was a generally lazy kind of guy. And he didn't want any more work than he already had. And he was perfectly fine putting out his magazine. And he had one thing he truly did not have any interest in, was marketing Mad in other forms with toys and gimmicks and things. And part of his reason was that he hated, at least the way he put it, he hated to see kids have to spend their money on other junk. But I think that was it for the most part. The Mad movie that came about, I think Warner Brothers, who ultimately had ownership of Mad at the time, came to Mad and said, we Animal House has been a ridiculous success for National Lampoon. I think we want to do the same thing for Mad. And that's where Up the Academy came about. I don't know that Mad, I don't think anyone involved with Mad itself had anything to do with the movie.
It's interesting you say that, because I was looking at the credits and I'm like, I don't see any familiar names in this thing, and I don't know why why they wouldn't include, the masterminds, the original masterminds of the magazine itself. You figure you'd be like, okay, we got all these great writers, Dick DiPartolo and all these other dudes, and like, I'm so surprised that they didn't just bring any of those guys in.
I gotta believe that the reason was basically Warner Brothers thought we're gonna use the Mad logo and imagery, and we're gonna get Bill Gaines to sign off on it, and then we'll take it from there. You handle your magazine, your little magazine over there. We'll handle the big Hollywood movies,
right?
And we've got this. Don't worry about it. And have you ever seen Up the Academy?
No, but I've seen some trailers for it, and I've been thinking about watching it simply because that golden statue that I saw inside the Mad Magazine office, they had referenced. They said, "Oh yeah, this was from a movie that we did," and then it kind of went in one ear and out the other way back then. But then I recently came back across that, and I go, "Oh my God, that's what that's from! That's from that movie." No, I haven't seen that movie yet.
Yeah, it's an interesting movie in truly how bad it is.
Oh, gotcha.
It's there's again, from as I understand it, there are a couple stories behind that. One of the stars of the film was an actor named Ron Liebman, and he's an Academy Award-winning actor, and he pretty much kind of, as the story goes, kind of disavowed that movie because it was so bad. He didn't want anything to do with it. Please take my name off of it. Bill Gaines did the same exact thing. He ended up paying to have Mad's name taken off the film because he despised it so much.
That's crazy.
And I don't know if you remember this or not, but the statue that you saw at the Mad offices is Alfred E. Neuman, kind of in this military gear, and he's standing on a giant kind of pedestal, and at the bottom of the pedestal, it reads, "Mad Magazine presents Up the Academy." Bill Gaines went up to the statue and scraped off the P so that it actually says Mad Magazine presents Up the Academy.
Oh my God, that's brilliant. Oh my God.
Yeah, and that was Bill himself who did that.
Wow. So. Resents. That's good. Well, it's so funny when Mad TV came out, it took me a while to actually realize that was supposed to be sort of a TV version, like some sort of incarnation of the magazine. It took a while for me to finally for that to click in. Were any of the original writers of Mad Magazine involved with that TV show at all? Do you know?
Again, no, not that I'm aware of. I don't believe any of the writers. There might have been, but truthfully, I do not believe there were. I think it was all done in L.A. Again, using the Mad imagery, logo, and Alfred to put it together under the guise of Mad, but it was its own entity.
What?
I thought it was good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I thought it was a pretty good show. You could tell it was trying to compete with Saturday Night Live, and as well as kind of maintain a feel for the different departments of the magazine. And it had a pretty good run. It had a nice long run. So.
Yeah.
And a lot of current talent came out of those casts.
Gosh, man, I just would love
Keegan-Michael Key, terrific.
Oh yeah, those guys were great. I would just love to, like, I think with any of all of the extra interviews and stuff that you have, if you can't find another place for it, I would say, now that you've got the Anchor app, see if you could, make little 10-minute episodes of some of the interviews that you weren't able to get in the movie. I mean, that would be pretty cool. If it's like, okay, this, today's episode, it's a little 10-minute segment that did not make it in the movie, and here you go. And I bet you'd probably get a lot of people wanting to tune into that, because man, you got so much information, and it deserves, I feel those spirits deserve to be seen and or felt by the people who like to get into the weeds, the people who like to get into the behind the scenes stuff.
Well, one of the exciting things that we did do is that we struck a deal with Chassis Media, which is run by Adam Carolla, the comedian Adam Carolla, And they are going to, Chassis Media is going to finish the production that I basically ran out of money to do. So they signed on to finish production and distribute the film. And they're excited about it. They understand the importance of Mad and the icon of Mad, and they see a terrific opportunity with this documentary. And depending on what we can do with this, where it goes, like you said, we do have a lot of interviews. Maybe they just end up on the Blu-ray as bonus footage. I don't know, but the stories are there, and it'd be cool to continue it and to tell more.
Oh my gosh, yeah, to be able to hear it from those guys' own words, because like you're saying, there's like when I was looking online, I couldn't find. I made a playlist of any sort of Mad Magazine stuff that I came across. Little interviews with those guys here and there, and whether they were on talk shows or like you're saying 60 Minutes, there they were back there in the office. And I wanted more, I wanted to hear those guys talk about, getting a kick out of reading one of Dick's, parody songs or stories for something and going, oh, I know exactly how I'm going to draw that. I love it. I can see it right now in my brain, how this is going to be. Like, to hear that process, I get such a kick out of it. I get such a kick out of the process and hearing those stories. And, that must have just been phenomenal for you to be able to sit in these rooms with these guys, especially when you're in the Mad office with a whole bunch of them, and to get a taste of what that must have been like back in the heyday. And here are all these zeitgeists just swimming around you.
Yeah, it was like that. The interesting thing I did find, however, is my big takeaway from this documentary is that when you are interviewing the very people who were the creators of the subject of what you're doing, for the most part, they were involved in their craft. They were living their day to day. They were trying to earn a living, and they were meeting deadlines, and they were brainstorming for the next project. And you see that in their interviews, that it's hard to get that sense of how important we think they are from them. Right. And that's also part of their humility and their humbleness of being able to know where they fit in all this. It's when you interview the people who were influenced by them, the people whose lives were affected by reading Mad and knowing the people who were behind it. That's when you get that gushing, that sense of holy moly, you guys changed my life kind of feeling. And that was also one of the challenges in editing this documentary is getting the best stories told from the best from each artist and writer, and getting the best. We have a lot of people telling the same stories. It was a matter of getting the best telling of that story to cut together.
Wow, man.
So, yeah. But it was for me, it was Kid in the Candy Store to get to sit down with these guys, and I did my very best not to play the fawning fan. I wanted to keep it all business as much as possible, to get them to tell me their stories, to be able to trust that I'm doing this with the best of their intentions, and or best keep their best interests in mind, I should say, and so that's what I think I did.
Well, Alan, thank you so much. We only have a few minutes here before it hangs up on us. I got basically an hour on every, for Anchor here. But
sure,
dude, man, this hour just flew by so fast. Thank you so much for
had a great time
unpacking your imagination and your experience, and answering all my questions. And I'm sure there are questions I forgot to ask, but God, I just gotta say this was really, it was so enjoyable for me to for you to take me through this time travel cruise.
Thank you. Truthfully, it was the same way for me when interviewing these guys. I tried to cram as many questions as I could in, and invariably, every single one of them, I'd shake their hands and say, thank you, it was great. They'd walk out the door, and I'd go, oh, yeah, I've got five more questions.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, so.
Gosh, man. Well, I'll when I upload this, I'll let you know, and it'll be available on probably like 30 different distribution, podcast distribution apps and directories and stuff.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Spotify and iTunes and TuneIn and just a bunch of different places. So I'll be promoting this. I'll be promoting it like crazy because I'm just so excited to be able to have talked to you. So thank you so much for taking the time out to talk to me.
It was a lot of fun. We're talking mad. How can you go wrong?
Absolutely. All right, man. Well, you have a great day, and we'll talk again.
This is Robert from Twin Peaks, and you're listening to Inspirado, Projecto. Got a light?